So how's it going, everyone? I'm Evan Berlin. I'm a fourth-year resident at Vanderbilt University Medical Center in Physical Medicine and Rehabilitation, and then next year I'll be doing my NASS Interventional Spine and Musculoskeletal Medicine Fellowship at Stanford. I'll be your moderator today, going over the NASS ISMM Fellowship, interview process, tips and tricks. I'm going to let my two speakers introduce themselves.
Hey everyone, I'm Adam Epps. I'm also a fourth-year resident at Vanderbilt University Medical Center, and next year I'll be doing my NASS Fellowship at Barrow.
Hi, and I'm Bill Sullivan, past president of NASS and a professor of physical medicine and rehabilitation at Vanderbilt University, and happy to be here to help answer some questions about the fellowship process.
And you used to be the fellowship director at Colorado, correct?
I was. That was a fellowship that was an ACGME accredited fellowship, and at the time, prior to the NASS ISMM process coming about, but involved from in the discussion process and NASS involvement in supporting this endeavor, which is I think been very important for fellowship candidates.
Yep, and you're involved in the interview process and the application process of the ISMM Fellowship at Vandy right now.
That's correct.
Yeah. All right, cool. So some of these questions are going to be more geared towards Adam and some more geared towards Bill. So the first question we have is, what's the application process like from day one?
Yeah, so I mean, I think like when we start applying, I think application process, you can start filling out your stuff before January. I think the official date that we sent out stuff was January 4th. So there is actually like a NASS application itself that's out. Not all the programs use just that. Like sometimes you'll send them that application January 4th and they may send you some supplemental stuff that you have to fill out extra. But there is one general application that you can fill out through NASS, and most programs just do that. I'm trying to think how many programs are like low 20s to mid 20s, actual NASS programs. So you can apply to as many as you want. It doesn't cost anything, which is nice compared to like residency. So you don't have to pay to send your applications anywhere. So that's really nice. And I think you can apply to. You can apply to all of them if you want, since it's free, or you can maybe be more selective if you would like. So applications kind of go out in January, and then you start hearing back from programs. Usually anywhere from like March, I would say, to like June. Some are even later than that, and at the start of July. But kind of most of the interviews I think end up being around May and then June, the start of June. I don't know if you have anything else to add about the application process.
I think one thing, you can always go see this information at spine.org. But also, I thought it was interesting that some programs would get back to you like the day after I submitted an application. I would say for the vast majority, they wouldn't get back to me for about a month or so, or some didn't even get back to me until they offered me an interview maybe 2 or 3 months later. But by far the vast majority, I don't think offered interviews until, I would say, May.
Yeah, for sure. It was like May,
April, May.
June.
Yeah, so you apply and then you have like a 3-month period where you're just twiddling your thumbs.
But that's important, right? Like, don't get disgruntled or discouraged by the fact that 100%. Look, it's a process over time, and different programs have a little bit of difference. So you shouldn't think about it as, oh, I didn't hear from these people yet, and so therefore they're not interested in me. And I think both of you guys experienced that in your overall fellowship.
And that's why I think the application, we didn't mention this, but I think the application process stays open through March. Like it opens in January and then it closes at like the end of March. So, and I don't know exactly when the best time is to, like, if you want to be on January 4th, I don't know that it matters so much, but because I know they both, I think Evan had his in on January 4th, but I put mine was like 3 weeks later than that, but it didn't really matter.
I would say, like I said, it probably doesn't matter that much, as long as you're not discouraged by the process and thinking that you're getting ghosted for any reason. That's the whole thing. I think that for a lot of this, I think sometimes people expect that, oh, the first person who comes back to me, that's who's most interested in me, and it doesn't necessarily work that way, just throughout the timing of the process.
Definitely. And I also thought it was interesting that some people ask for your STEP scores, some people ask for a picture of yourself, some people ask for my medical school CV or MSPE. So make sure you have that stuff handy because they will ask you for that, and you'll have to just reply with that. So then how many programs did you actually apply to?
So I think I applied to around 15 programs. So I didn't apply to every single program, and more of the ones like maybe I didn't apply to were just more of a geographic location reason why I didn't apply to some of those other NASS programs. So I think I narrowed it down to 15, which I felt pretty good about. I think I got interviews to almost all 15. Yeah. Maybe there were like 2 that I didn't, but
yeah. And I think I probably applied to the same amount, around 15. But if you're willing to live in all the places that have the locations, I would say just apply to
like
all
I said, it's free, so it doesn't cost anything. So there's
Yeah.
No harm, no foul.
And then the interview process itself, which we can talk about. So the vast majority are virtual. I know I went to one that was in person. I believe Adam went to one that was in person.
Yeah.
We went to different ones that are in person. They all, at the very least, offered virtual.
Yeah.
So again, it wasn't like a big like money waster going to travel to all these cities. Do you want to talk about the interview process itself?
Sure. So yeah, I mean,
no stress.
There's really
right?
yeah. I mean, I think it is, honestly. It was less stressful than like the residency interviews are, for sure. I mean, it's way more informal. Like, just it's more of a conversation. Like, do we fit? You know, what are your goals? What are your future plans? Things like that. So I think it's more of just getting a feel in those interviews. Like, are we going to mesh? Can we work together for a year? Would we consider even? I think some people interview with like, hey, would we consider hiring you? Not necessarily, but just like, can I get along with you? And you know, what are your goals here, and how does that fit? Because I mean, I know there's a lot of people. Like, I don't feel like you're applying. Like, I remember when we were applying to Vanderbilt at the same time, like there was like, I think 90 people interviewed for like 4 spots, whereas I feel like it's not as many people interviewing. You may be getting like 20 people interviewing for 1 or 2 spots. So I feel like it was more of, I mean, just the interviews are very chill and easy to talk with the coordinators and stuff. So
yeah, and I felt like they asked us the typical interview questions like, tell me about yourself. Why do you want to go into interventional spine, musculoskeletal medicine? I see you had this one research project or one of these research projects on your CV. Like, explain to me this research project. So pretty easy questions like that.
Yeah, I got definitely crazier questions in residency interviews. Yeah. Like, there was no like wild, like, what animal would you be or anything like that. It was definitely more just straightforward questions about like your career and what you want to do.
Yeah, and I would say it was probably 50-50 if the interviews were like one-on-one, like me and attending versus me and 2 attendings. And then one of the places I interviewed at was me and 4 attendings.
Yeah, a few places were definitely like that, where it was me and a couple of attendings, and then some were just like you and 1 attending. And it also depends on, different, all the fellowships in NASS can be a little bit different compared to residency, where you may be at a place where you're only with like 1 or 2 providers in general, and then you may be going to another place that has like 16 providers. So
for sure,
that can just vary.
Yeah, from the interviewer's side instead of the interviewee, it's hard, because especially going from in-person versus virtual interviews, like the time that you have and the availability, and so sometimes doing those 2-on-1s is a time saver, not just for the person, for the applicant, but also for for both sides of the equation. But sometimes the 4-on-1 it probably feels more like, oh, if you're out having dinner, with an applicant, and you'd be 4 people with you. But I don't think there's necessarily a good or bad way to do that either. It's just a little bit of personal preference and sort of the timing of it and how you can be most efficient with the process too. So,
and that being said, and we'll move on shortly, I did think that I got a really good feel of the program of the one that I went to, more so than the programs that I visited virtually.
Oh yeah.
Would you agree with that?
Oh yeah, like going there, you got a better feel, is what you're saying. Yeah. Oh, for sure. I mean,
so if you can swing it and go in person, if they allow that, and obviously if you can afford that, I would recommend that, because I thought that was beneficial.
Oh, for sure. I think definitely, like, outside of COVID, if that wasn't going on, then I think if they're the programs you're more interested in, try to save those couple, like maybe 2 or 3 that you're willing to actually go in person, just because you can see a lot more than you can virtually.
Definitely. All right, so as we're moving on, I think this is a question that would be interested to everyone who's applying for fellowship, not just ISMM, and even some people who are applying to residency. So what's a good way for both of you guys to strengthen your application or your CV? Is that by research? Is that by doing abstracts and poster presentations? Is that by volunteering? What do you guys think?
As a residency program director too, and also involved in the fellowship, these guys are laughing, and I can't stop myself from saying it, which is, it depends. My favorite 2-word answer is, it depends. And there's different philosophies. Do you have a whole bunch of things in one area and really focus on that, or do you have a breadth of experience? I tend to think that there's a sweet spot of having a breadth of experience, so you're not just doing one thing, and showing some flexibility for doing those. And if you can, I mean, certainly doing things within your area of interest make more sense. And so again, looking at an application from an applicant who has research in ophthalmology, probably to me isn't as important as doing something, and it could be volunteering or research or poster versus a peer-reviewed, double-blind, randomized, placebo-controlled trial. Not everybody can do that in med school or residency. And so I think having whatever opportunities you have, taking advantage of those opportunities, and then as much as you can hone it into spine and musculoskeletal medicine component of those things is important. And again, I mean, having those experiences and being involved in different aspects of it. Not everybody has those same opportunities. So whatever opportunities you can have, making sure you take advantage of those opportunities.
Yeah, definitely.
And putting them on your CV.
That's another good thing, and that's something that Bill told me one of the first times he got to Vandy was you should be updating your CV once every month, if not more frequently. I think that's a great point because you don't want to get stuck behind, then you'll forget things, and you'll never.
I've been so bad about that at times, but I've gotten much better in the last year for sure. You forget a lot of stuff you do, especially the busier you are.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think the same thing with all that. I mean, I think if you can just try to show, like if you're wanting to do a NASS ISMM fellowship, try to put as much effort into those areas that can help you, whether, MSK stuff's fine. Like just show that you have an interest to the field. I mean, like you may not have, for us at Vanderbilt, we obviously have a lot of research opportunities. So if you have those opportunities, take advantage of them. Mm-hmm. If you have a volunteering opportunity that, can be more of like a spine pain, MSK type thing, show that you have interest there. And then just overall, I think when you're getting like letters and things, if you work hard in residency, even if you're in spinal cord, I think that it'll end up working out for you, and they'll see that, hey, this is a good applicant. Everyone speaks highly of him at his program or her, and I think that's more important than anything.
And not every fellowship's the same, and not every applicant's the same, and so that's why the match is the match, so that things try to match into that. And you were told at one point too, like, oh, we look more highly upon a case report than a different level of research, right? I mean, different places may have those different opinions where they'll tell you things that they're looking for. So, unfortunately, there isn't a one right answer, except you do want to do, like as I said, take advantage of the opportunities that you have and make sure that you put your best effort into
it.
Exactly.
Show that you're working hard and doing your best in residency.
Yeah, and I think personally, it's just tough because by the time we apply, it's January of our PGY3 year. So you have 2.5 years of time to improve your application by the time you match your residency, by the time you apply to fellowship. So it's really not that much time. You can't be doing like RCTs left and right during that time.
Yeah, and it's like you have an intern year.
Yeah, one of the super intern year. Yeah, exactly. So for me, it was all about low-hanging fruit. And I was like, I'm going to take advantage of all the low-hanging fruit. And that was doing case reports and abstracts and poster presentations. And the first couple I wrote and did, like they were tough to write. Took me a couple hours, if not a couple days. But now you can crank them out in like 30 minutes, and you apply to all the societies.
Yeah, don't tell that to the societies. Reports,
well, maybe a little bit long, but there's cool cases that are going along all around you, and you just have to show interest and talk to your attendings if they had any cool cases. And I think it's an easy way to boost your CV, and you can apply it to obviously NASS, to SIS, to AAP, MNAR. Any organization will allow these abstracts and posters. I think it's a good way to booster it. Yeah, and then obviously with the research, I think it would be very difficult to start a research project on your own during residency and then complete it and put it on your CV and whatnot. So I know what me and Adam both did was we went to the attendings that were involved in research, and we knew we were involved in research, and told them that we're interested in going into the field of spine and how can we help. And they were more than receptive of that.
Oh, for sure.
And they put us on projects, and I thought that really helped our CVs also.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. Okay, and so speaking of societies, so what societies should people join? And when they join them, should they be going to conferences, and what conferences should they go to?
Well, I mean, obviously,
I
had to answer the question, of NASS, and again, I mean, there's benefits, right? Resident and fellow memberships, and so if you can attend those conferences, I think it's helpful, and many of the residency and the fellowship program directors might be members of other societies too, and so there is an opportunity to network at any of the meetings that you can. So, especially if you can swing it and your program allows you to go and you have it's geographically reasonable to attend those meetings. I think any of the meetings are good where you would have the ability to network with the fellowship directors and the people that you would be working with.
Definitely.
So certainly, and involvement in those societies, being involved. Nobody. I mean, I'm telling you guys this because we didn't do it. Nobody just says, "Oh, I'm going to sign you up for these things." You have to be willing to do it and express an interest in it. Nothing's given to you. You had to express an interest and then be involved. And so the committees that you guys have been on, you asked to do those things, and nobody said, "Hey, I'm going to put you on this committee because of who I am." And so doing those things, no matter what what involvement that you can get. You don't want to spread yourself too thin, because if you do that, then you're going to be an absentee member. So just making sure that you're committed to the things that you are able to do, and like everything in life, doing the best job that you can.
For sure.
Yeah, I don't know that I have like too much to add to that, but I mean, like, yeah, obviously we're involved with both with NASS and SIS, and have got on some committees with that, just involvement. Like Bill said, we kind of reached out to that. We were like, oh, we knew these were the two societies to help us with our future careers, and then just how can we get involved in those societies? So we asked around. They're like, oh, we have these committees, and it was cool. I mean, obviously we don't have as much to bring to the table being residents more, but like it's a great learning opportunity, and then we're going to be the doctors of the future. So it's good to learn from these guys, so that then we can help out with those committees and then people who come behind us. So I think any way that you can get involved, that's awesome.
Yeah, I think another low-hanging fruit to boost your CVs, being on these committees. They are a time commitment, but I don't think they're overly
Not a crazy time commitment.
Yeah, and like Adam was saying, I don't know how much we're bringing to the table, but I think it's a good experience for us that maybe 10 years down the road, it'll be a completely different experience, which would be cool. And you have to start somewhere.
Yeah.
But yeah, I remember one of the first times we met Bill was he went around the room asking people what societies they were a part of, and it was
he did. I did that.
Our PG1 year, and people were just saying like random letters I'd never even heard of.
Yeah, and some people would have like 10 on there. Yeah. But then we kind of talked about that. It was like, how involved are you going to society? It's probably better. I know Bill kind of mentioned this, but it's like you should probably maybe be in like 2, maybe 3 that you're really involved with and are really making a difference in, instead of being involved with 10, but you're really not doing anything for any of the societies. You don't really know anybody because you're not really involved in it. So
100%. But yeah, I mean, just go and apply to these societies and become members. Like Bill was saying, they're free as resident and fellows for most societies. And then what's cool is they'll start sending you emails about being on committees and going to conferences and whatnot. And that's kind of how we got involved, is just through those emails and just reading them and applying from there. But something that there's no reason not to join these committees.
Correct.
Or these societies. And I thought attending conferences was very useful, especially with networking.
Oh yeah, I mean, a lot of pretty much at like NASS and SIS, you pretty like have a lot of the docs who are running half the courses are all fellowship directors. Like pretty much all of them are. So.
Yeah. And the world that we are going into, the interventional spine, musculoskeletal world, is so small that you're really going to rub elbows with everyone. So making a good impression may go a long way. So kind of piggybacking off of that. So the world is so small in this field. So let's say you're doing residency at a program that doesn't have an interventional spine and musculoskeletal medicine attending, or doesn't have someone who's heavily involved in NASS, or doesn't have a NASS fellowship or something like that. What's a good way to get a letter of rec? Because obviously a letter of rec from one of those people that we just mentioned would be very useful in applying, but if it's not available to you, especially in the time of COVID where you can't do aways, what would you recommend?
Yeah, I mean, I think you want to get letters of recommendation. It's hard to know, but from people who write good letters of recommendation. And so somebody who knows you, somebody who's willing to do it, somebody who can speak to your work product, somebody who understands the whole process and doesn't just write a one-liner that says, yeah, I recommend this guy or person. And that can really come from anybody. That can come from, you kind of mentioned it, right? Like it could come from a spinal cord injury attending or a stroke attending or something like that, who can really talk to you about your commitment to patient care and whether it's research and education, and sort of paint a picture of how you would be, even if they don't specifically know you, or they don't necessarily know somebody in the interventional spine world. They might have sort of a connection in a different aspect of your specialty. So, and in physical medicine and rehabilitation, I mean, if you're at a program, you're going to get a letter from your program director and/or chair of your department, and those people would tend to have some, something within the 6 degrees of separation. If somebody knows somebody or can speak, and might generate a phone call about, hey, tell me more about this person, because they don't necessarily have an intervention, a NASS fellowship program within their institution. So I think there are ways around that, and really just working hard again in everything that you do. Because if you, for example, you as you guys know, you want to make sure that you become broad, well-trained residents and during your residency. And again, when you're getting those letters, many programs, you may have those people available to you, but not during that time of your residency. So if your residency is so heavily focused on inpatient, you have to maybe get letters from people like that. So I think that's a little bit harder of a question, because there are different scenarios for different people. But yeah, you want to get letters from people who can write a good letter and speak to your overall qualifications for the position.
I think Adam and I are a little bit spoiled that we had so many interventional spine attendings that we had to like choose which ones we wanted. But even that, like, and you correct me if I'm wrong, like I know that attendings that weren't interventional spine attendings, like our SCI attending or our TBI attendings, went up to you or Dr. Kennedy and said like, oh, Dr. Epps did a really good job on this rotation.
Well,
and that made you write a better
absolutely, especially for me as program director, and again, not having sort of a one-on-one clinical relationship. Absolutely, program directors and chairs of department will by far reach out broadly to the faculty that they're working with and say, okay, I know that, we know they can do this, but how were they in the other areas? And so when you start getting those good comments, it's absolutely easier to write a letter of recommendation.
For sure. Yeah. So here's a question that I thought was kind of fun when one of our PGY2s asked me. So during the application process and the interview process, do you want to be that person who sticks out? And I know the answer is going to be it depends. And if you do want to be like, how do you want to stick out? What's a good way to stick out versus a bad way to stick out?
You definitely do not want to stick out in the negative way. And it's just like your personal statement, right? Like your personal statement, obviously it's a personal statement. You want it to be personal, and I've shifted a little bit of saying, okay, put something personal in there. But your personal statement shouldn't have to help you. It absolutely shouldn't hurt you, though. So if you're using your personal statement as a way to stick out, I just can't imagine that that's a good move. At least for me and the people that I know, and most of the people that I would sort of philosophically agree with. There might be a program out there, though, that wants sort of the person who's out there. I don't personally know who those are, but I wouldn't use your personal statement or your dress or your or answers to interview questions as a way to necessarily stick out. Because for the most part, I think that sticking out, trying to stick out.
You can tell that when
you
people
can
are trying to stick out.
When somebody's trying to stick out, you can tell, and it is invariably a negative. You don't want to be just weird and raising red flags or things like that. Because again, it's just like if I came, if I was trying to stick out as a program director or a fellowship director, you guys might say, ooh, had this sort of weird feeling about it. I wonder if I can work for an entire year with this person. Now that doesn't mean to be a conformist or to try to just be the same as everybody else. But I think you could go too far. In trying to stick out.
So putting you on a spot then, I know we just interviewed, like what were some times where you saw people stand out that you're like, oh, I don't know if I would have done that?
I think the biggest for me that I would probably not recommend doing is just that when you're on, especially like with some of these virtual interviews, they have like all of us on the call and they'll be kind of telling about the program, and there'll be like 10 to 15 people on there. And I just felt like, and like a lot of the fellowship directors will be like, feel free to ask questions as you go through, which is great and awesome of them. But I just think like you don't want to be the person who is just constantly asking questions every 5 minutes and they can't talk because it's like you're interrupting them. And I felt like that was something I saw with some of those, and I was like, I would not do that. Would not be interrupting the guy like every 5-10 minutes. Just kind of let them give their spiel, ask some good questions at the end, and just be thoughtful with your questions. Don't ask a question that you could easily look up. That's just a general data question. I feel like you're just like asking a question to ask a question. Just think about a general question that you were genuinely, that you could not search on the internet and find, or like in a packet, like something you would actually.
Totally agree with that, because otherwise it really comes across as you're just asking a question, speaking up just so you can be heard. And there's really no reason for it. If somebody said, what town is Vanderbilt?
Exactly.
Well, you should be able to look that one up there. So.
Exactly. Or like asking a question that was just answered or just on the
slide.
Yeah,
exactly.
Like
I would say that too. It's like that's what I just was getting annoyed with on a few of those. It was just like people would just keep asking questions, and I'm like, these questions have been answered, or you could easily find these questions. Like think about a general question that you probably would not know unless you were there in clinic, and you would like that you could learn from being in clinic. So that's the questions I would.
So speaking of questions, what were some good questions that you thought was kind of a good like broad question to ask these programs when you were doing your interview, most likely at the one-on-one interview?
And I think there's so many you could ask. I mean, one question I think it's interesting to see is just kind of how referrals happen within each place. Like, do you get, are most of your patients being referred from like neurosurgery or spine, or are you the first line? Because I think that was different at each program. Like, does it get referred to you guys first before they've had any surgeries or injections, or does it go to neurosurgery or ortho first? And I thought that was one interesting question. I'm trying to think. I may give Bill the spot. I think of more questions.
I think because again, but that's a great question to ask, because it gives you sort of a framework for how your patient flow is going to be. So I think that's good. I think sort of the other. I think one important question is to sort of understand sort of the learner environment. And people ask us that quite a bit, where sort of maybe the competition for procedure time.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Are there 3 medical students and 4 residents and 2 fellows? How many people really are around in clinic, and what's your day-to-day relationship with the fellowship? And then also how much time you get with each individual faculty versus individual people. And we have guidelines within this in terms of how much time you're supposed to spend with the fellowship director in the NASS sort of accreditation process or recognized process. But yeah, I think that those are really good questions of trying to understand sort of the framework of how the fellowship is and how much time you spend with each different person.
Yeah.
And I always like to know, it doesn't really matter to me, like it's just more of like, what are your extra responsibilities? Are you taking call? Just like if it's not, I mean, some will obviously have that in like packets or on the website and tell you what. But sometimes it's just good to just know like kind of what your typical like day looks like at clinic, or a typical week looks like in clinic. Like how much will you be in the procedure suite? How much will you be in clinic? Just to get a general feel for it. I think so.
And a lot of those questions we didn't touch base on this at the start of this. You can ask the fellows, because a lot of these interviews that you'll have time with just the fellow and not the attendings, which I think is interesting too. Because I think that's a lot of times when you can like actually ask the real questions that you really want to know. Yeah.
For sure.
And some of the questions I like to, one of the questions I like to ask was that this is just a unique experience where we're interviewing for a job or a fellowship that we're starting 15 months from then. So asking them like, what change is going to happen in the next 15 months?
Yeah, that is true.
And a lot of times people did give me good answers. A lot of times it's like Bill says, it depends. But it is. It's 15 months is a long time, and a lot can happen in 15 months. So I thought that was a good question to ask. And then one question I like to ask, and I got a recurring answer, was what skills do you expect us to have on July 1st or August 1st, whenever we start fellowship? And over again, I heard, which was surprising me, is they want no procedural skills. They rather us do 0 procedures before fellowship, so that they're starting with a clean slate. And that was surprising, because I feel like most people.
I think I was going to say, well, it depends.
Yeah. I think I don't want to say 0, but it is absolutely true. If you think that the goal of your fellowship is to do as many procedures as possible, that may not be the goal of the fellowship director. And if you think that in order to get the fellowship, you want to come in and say, oh, I've already done 800 procedures,
on that.
It's not necessary. In fact, sometimes it is detrimental, because again, it would be a potentially a remediation, rather than, okay, we have sort of this open, willing, and
most people have bad habits.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, you pick up bad habits, especially in residency too. You're trying to do things faster, and
But I just thought it was interesting, because I feel like
you heard that a lot.
Yeah, all the time. And as residents, we're always like, how many procedures
have you gotten? Yeah, exactly. And I think it definitely does not matter. No place is picking you based on like how many procedures you've done. You can say you've done 500 in residency, but they're never going to pick you just because of that.
That's correct.
At all. Like, I mean.
Yeah. I remember when I asked Bill this question too, before I interviewed, what questions to ask during the interview process. He made sure that we asked not all like procedural questions. Like, you need to ask non-procedural questions also, because these fellowships, I mean, most of the fellowships the majority of your time is not in the procedure suite actually. So you have to make sure not just to go up there and ask 10 questions about procedures, because they're not training needle monkeys. They're training interventional spine doctors.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I think that's all.
And that can be a turnoff, right?
Yeah.
Because if or just maybe not a turnoff as much as a non-match.
Yeah. That is another thing, though. Like, that is one of those.
It is still a match, and so you really are trying to match with the program and match with what your future plans are, or match with what your philosophical viewpoint is, and so.
And I was thinking with going back, like with the NASS ISMM fellowship, it's more about like diagnosing back pain and treating. It's not all just about doing procedures 24/7. I think if you get someone who comes in like speaking to the bad questions or like a bad applicant, you don't want to come in just constantly being like all procedures is all you want to do. And I think that's going to look not as favorably for you in a NASS ISMM fellowship. Like, they're going to look negatively against that.
All right, one other thing is with these fellowships, and in terms of where you would apply and where you'd live, I do think it's important for people to recognize that pick the best fellowship for you. Almost in some ways, I mean, if you can do it, in some ways it could be regardless of geography, because you really should be able to live any place for 1 year. That said, there are certain aspects of things where you want to be happy with where you're living, but but picking the best place for you or having those options of the best places for you, I think is important.